Welcome to the Hello Sunday podcast with me, Nikki Hayden. This is the podcast that discusses everything self-development, spirituality and sobriety, and it wouldn't be me without a little sprinkling of humour. Whether you are just starting out on your journey of self-development or have been exploring these topics for years, are completely alcohol-free or just curious about living a more sober lifestyle, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll be exploring topics in both solo episodes and with some amazing guest experts. So if you like what you hear, then please subscribe, rate and review. So with that said, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of Hello Sunday. How are we all? How are we? I really hope that you're good. I am recording this on a morning. I've actually just been for the most gorgeous nature walk with one of my best friends. And she's had 2 coffees, guys. She's had 2 coffees. So this episode could be a little hectic. I'm not going to lie. I'm quite caffeine sensitive. And my husband made me a coffee before I went out, and then we went for a walk, stopped at a coffee shop and took it with us and had another one, and it was quite strong. So we're going to see how this episode goes, but yeah, I am feeling quite buzzed. So apologies in advance I talk fast as it is. So yeah, I'm already apologising for the speed and potential hectic nature of what you're about to receive. But I hope you're all good. I've got a little bit of a request before we dive into today's episode. Could you do me a huge favour, and whatever platform you are currently listening to the podcast on, whether that is Apple Podcasts or Spotify or I think there's a Google app, maybe. I know there's one called Podcast Addict. Yeah, there's a few, isn't there? I'm sure that whatever you're listening on, you can do this. Could you just go and follow the podcast? I've looked at the stats this week and there's only 11% of my regular listeners that actually follow the show. So basically following the show just means that you click the little button that says follow and it downloads the episodes weekly. You can undownload them once you've listened, so you're not taking up storage on your phone, but it just means that we get an idea of who's a regular listener, and in essence it helps to bump the podcast up the charts along with the reviews. So yeah, 89% of you guys that listen regularly are not following the show. So I would be so grateful if you could just go and press that follow button, and we can hopefully convert those stats a little bit in the right direction. So what are we talking about today? Well, I heard not really a quote, I heard a fact this week. It was in a book that I'm reading, and it's all about success and creating habits, and I guess just, creating the vision and the action to become the version of you that you want to be and create the life that you want. It's called You Are a Fucking Success. It's by an amazing lady called Noor Hibbert. I'll link it in the show notes. But there was a fact in there that I really resonated with, and I just wanted to share it today and just chat a little bit more around, I guess, just the premise of it and understanding why it's the case. And that is that an aeroplane burns more fuel per minute in taking off and the climb to its ascent to whatever height it needs to get to than it does for the rest of the journey. I think in the book she actually said it burns more fuel in takeoff than it does the rest of the journey, but that's not strictly true. I did fact check it because that seemed a little bit wild that in 10-15 minutes it could burn more than in 12 hours if you're going on a long haul, but it's per minute. And that makes so much sense, doesn't it? It's going to take more fuel to ascend, to take off for that, first bit of momentum and to ascend to where it needs to be, than it will to maintain that for the rest of the journey. So that made me think how this applies in life, how it applies in habits, how it applies in achieving and goal setting and taking action against those goals. And it does take a hell of a lot more momentum to get you to where you want to be than it does to maintain that and to stay there. So you think about, like, I don't know, learning a new skill. How hard was it to learn how to drive? If those of you that drive, how hard was it to learn that skill, to go through the test, to go through your weekly lessons, to, in essence, get to the point where now you probably get in your car every day and you just drive and you probably don't even think about it. Like, when was the last time you thought about how hard it was to drive? Maybe there's times where if you're a newer driver or you're a nervous driver, you might encounter something like maybe going on the motorway or going through a busy city centre or something where you might have to think about it a bit more and pay a bit more attention. But generally speaking, once you've learned to drive, you just do it. You don't really think about it. And it's the same with anything, with becoming a parent. You have a baby, you shit your pants about how on earth you're meant to look after an entire human being and keep it alive. And then after the first maybe 6 months, it just becomes second nature. You get into a routine, you get to know your child, you get to know what the cries that they make, when they're hungry, when they're tired, when they need changing, and you just adapt to being a parent. You can apply this to anything, the new job that you start. How difficult is it the first few weeks when you're learning the systems, learning everyone's name, learning what job they do, getting to know the culture and how things flow. And then before you know it, you've gone through a work day and you've not thought about any of that stuff. You've just done your job. So it really does take a lot more energy and a lot more kind of output to get to where you want to go versus just maintaining that. This really became apparent to me as well recently because, as I mentioned on the last episode, we had been away. We'd been on holiday for a few days, and then we got back and I was ready to, I'd put all the plans in place before we went to completely just delve straight back into work. I'd got some real momentum building and I was ready to just smash it. And then we came down with COVID. And that absolutely floored both myself and my husband. We were in bed. It was a really, really horrible week of just both feeling really low energy, feeling really crap, not being able to do much. We had to resort to eating easy foods and foods that we felt like rather than our normal healthy eating. We couldn't go to the gym. We couldn't work for a few days. Everything that we normally did to maintain that healthy routine and healthy lifestyle just had to be shelved. And of course, the priority was healing and getting back to health and resting. So it wasn't an option. You can't push through that. In fact, I saw a PT the other day on Instagram, I think, and he was sick. He didn't feel well. And then the next day he was in the gym and he put something on his Instagram that I felt was a little bit toxic, maybe, around, normally I'm the sort of person that pushes through this. And I just thought, no, maybe that's fine for you, but for me, absolutely not. If you're not well, you need to rest. Your energy resources need to go into that. So that's what we did. We just completely rested, and that meant that all of our habits went out of the window. And for some of them, it was fine. Like for the healthy eating, for instance, we probably had 3 days where our diet was a little bit more just quick and easy. I know the one night we ordered in pizza because neither of us, well, I don't really cook anyway. He's the cook. And we were in bed all day, so there was just no way that was going to be a night of cooking proper, nutritious meals. So that wasn't too difficult to get back to. But the gym, that was a whole different story. I ended up having 3 weeks off altogether. And Jesus Christ, going back it wasn't so much the actual action of like going back. It wasn't the physical. I felt good when I went back, and I took it a little bit easier, dropped down weights, didn't do as many reps, just really listened to my body and eased myself back in. But it was the mental side. It was the mental side of getting myself there and of getting back into the routine and of not making excuses. And I'm not gonna lie, I did find it really difficult. And then obviously the first week that I went back 3 times in the week, it was physically hard. I felt by the end of the week like I was drained of energy. So that momentum that I'd built up, that routine that I'd got into, the habits that I'd built, just went out the window. And I've found it's the same with drinking as well. When I did the first 100 days of not drinking, the momentum of getting to that point for the first probably 4 to 6 weeks, it was quite hard. The first couple of weeks were a bit of a novelty, and then it got quite difficult because we had some events and things where I would normally have drank occasions. And then we were going into slightly warmer weather. So it was tricky. But once I'd done the first probably maybe 7 or 8 weeks, it became a lot easier. It did become just a habit then. But then the minute that you break that and you come out of it, it's really difficult to get back into that groove and that momentum of, the habit and of just saying no and abstaining. And I've really found that other people that I've spoken to have felt the same way, that if they're just saying no and they're just completely, it's off the table, it's almost the easier option than having the option of saying, I might drink, and then having that battle in your head and saying, I'll just have a couple. And then obviously that goes out of the window once you've had one. Get into that momentum, get into that, building that habit is tough, but actually once you've done it, it's easier to stay there than it is to keep kind of coming out of that momentum and chopping and changing. And I think a lot of people felt this in lockdown because life happens, right? We couldn't help. I wasn't going to not enjoy my holiday and go to the gym every day and eat healthy just to stay in the habit. You've got to have a break. You've got to give yourself a bit of leeway. But we didn't realise, obviously, we were going to get sick with COVID. But a good example of this is like lockdown. Nobody knew or could have, foresaw at the end of, foresaw, is that even a word? We're going to go with it. At the end of 2019, that for, a large part of 2020, it would be illegal to be within 2 meters of someone else and to go to the gym and get your hair done. So a lot of the stuff that we were doing regularly, the habits that we'd built, the going to the gym, the routine that we had with going to work, seeing friends, seeing family, all that was completely paused. I think that's why so many people's mental health suffered, because not only were we very, there was a lot of solitude and we were being kept away from people, which it's human nature to be, social animals, but actually the habits that we'd built were suddenly literally put on lockdown. They were suddenly paused. You had to create a new habit if you wanted to keep exercising. You had to do a home workout. You had to do a run. Gyms were shut. The beauty routines that we'd got into, the social meetups that we maybe have weekly with friends, maybe going to visit your family, all of that was completely shut down and completely paused. And so getting back into the momentum, I know people that have still not gone back to some of the habits that they had before lockdown. And don't get me wrong, some of them were maybe, it was a good time for reflection. Some of them were maybe not as healthy or as good. And it was a good thing that we put them on pause. But for some people, the momentum was building in a really positive way. And to just stop that, it was really tricky then to get back to it. So what can we do? What can we kind of learn from this little fact, this little piece of information? I think for me, it's really about where you've got a healthy habit or where you've really taken action and got to a point that you're happy with. The best thing that you can do is try and keep that consistency. We all know about the compound effect. We all know about I think I've spoken about it before on here, how if you were, going to a certain place in a plane, just by taking that 1%, the nose 1% in a slightly different direction, you'd end up in a whole different place. The compound effect of that over the journey just snowballs. And so it's the same with goals and habits. If you have created momentum, it snowballs positively. If you stop that momentum, you've then got to almost take, steps backwards to get back to where you were. So it's like push start in a car. If you've ever had to push start a car, it's so difficult to get that first bit of momentum. You start pushing and you think this is literally going nowhere. But once you've got the first, bit of momentum going, it just gets easier and easier and easier until in the end you can jump into the car and it will start. That car cuts out again and you've got to start again, you've got to do it again. For those of you that are regular listeners to the show, or maybe you know me personally, you won't have been able to get away without hearing me talk about Simprove. Simprove is a scientifically backed, water-based probiotic drink. You drink it daily and it has been scientifically proven to help with things like bloating, IBS symptoms, pain. It was actually a dietitian friend of mine that introduced it to me last year, and I honestly wouldn't be without it now. It's helped with my energy, with my bloating, it's helped with my immune system, and also things like my skin. The list is honestly endless. Now, I have got a code for you. So if you'd like to try Simprove, you can get 50%, that's a massive 50% off your first 3-month subscription by going on to simprove.com and putting in the code Nikki50. That's NIKKI50, or clicking the link in the show notes. So using the example of fitness, if you're working out 3 times a week and you miss a week because you're going on holiday, it's probably not going to be too difficult to get back into it. But if you miss 2 or 3 weeks, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult. So there's going to be times in life where you can't help but lose momentum. We're going to get sick. We're going to have bereavements. We're going to have holidays. There's going to be things that come up that are positive and maybe not so positive that are going to get in the way. That's just life. But where it's a choice, always choose to show up for yourself. If you've got a choice of doing something that you know your future self is going to benefit from, that has become a bit of a habit, that you've created some momentum, it might be the easier option in the short term to not do it. Let's again use the example of fitness. You might decide, I can't bother to work out today. But I guarantee if you miss that session, you're twice as likely to miss the next session. If you just go and do that session, you'll probably come out of it and be really, really grateful that you showed up for yourself, because then the next session is going to be even easier to show up for. When I learned to drive, I started doing driving lessons, and I think I was 18. And I did my first lot of driving lessons. I took a test. I failed that test. And then I went to university. For 3 years at university, I didn't do a single driving lesson. When I went back to doing lessons when I left university, I pretty much had to start from the beginning again, because I hadn't built enough momentum with the skill. I hadn't had enough consistency during that 3-year period to be able to remember what I was doing. Some of it came back, yeah. Some of it was I kind of remember how to do that. But it was tough. It was really tough. It wasn't anywhere near as easy as it would have been had I have just continued the lessons and maybe done another test in quick succession. I would say the best kind of piece of advice that I've been given on showing up for yourself and being consistent is almost forget about the goal, the end goal. So yes, you need to have a strong why. Yes, you need to know why you're doing it. But sometimes you just need to take that next step. You just need to look at the day ahead or look at the week ahead. So for instance, with drinking, if you've decided that you don't want to drink for 100 days, let's say, looking at that goal, say, I don't know, a week or two in, it's going to be really bloody hard to see the end point. You're probably going to feel like it's so long and you've just got, such a big amount of time before that end goal that it can be really off-putting. It can make you just think, what's the point? And you might have a really good why. You might have, I don't know, kids that you don't want to grow up around you drinking regularly. You might not be sleeping well. You might have put on weight and need to do it for health reasons. There's so many reasons why people decide to cut down drinking. But sometimes that bigger end goal is so far away and you haven't yet felt the benefits that it can disrupt your momentum. It can stop you showing up for yourself. So what I would say with that is just look at the next step in front of you. If you're looking to work out 3 times a week, just show up today. Just go and do that one workout. Forget about the other 2. Forget about getting abs or losing 2 stone or being able to run around after your kids. Just show up for that next workout. Just look at the next thing in front of you. If you are starting a new job or learning a new skill, what is the next action you need to take? Do you just need to show up the next day for that job and learn one more person's name or learn about one project that you're going to be working on? If you're learning a new skill, what is the next action that you need to take to just get 1% better? You don't need to look at, maybe you're learning a language. You don't need to look at being fluent. Just learn one more phrase or one more sentence. It's the compound effect, and that consistency of showing up for yourself will eventually you'll look back one day and be like, oh my God, I got here. And that was how I felt about not drinking. The best thing I'd done was just to consistently say, I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. Forget about next weekend. Forget about 2 months in advance. I'm just not going to drink today. And it's the same with anything. As long as you just look at that next step in front of you and show up, complete that action or that task, it's habit forming, it's consistency. And then when you start to see the results, the consistency and the momentum it's easy to maintain then. And then when life does happen, when things do get in the way, it's easier to get back to. There's an amazing book called Atomic Habits. I've spoken about it plenty of times. Again, I'll link it in the show notes. And that's all about habit building. There's so many stats out there about how long it takes to form a habit, 21 days, 60 days, 28 days. However long it takes for you, once you've built that habit, it's so much easier to get back to it. So it's almost like, imagine the plane analogy. So you've taken that action, you've taken that effort, you've put in the time, you've put in the energy, you've got up to that altitude. Imagine then the plane is at, 30,000 feet, and then it has some turbulence and has to drop down to 20,000 feet. It's a hell of a lot easier to climb that 10,000 feet again than it is to go from the ground all the way back up. I know people that have had accidents. I know people that have had long-term illnesses and had to start from ground zero again. And that is so tricky. It's so hard. But mentally, once you've done it once, you know what it takes to get back there. You know that you've done it. You know you've got the resilience and the skill set and the mindset to be able to do that thing. So once you've done it, you've already changed your neural pathways in your brain. You've already created the ability to complete that thing or to do that skill or to mentally face that challenge. And it does make it easier. Sure, it's hard. It is hard to start again, but you've already done it once, so you can absolutely do it again. So I just felt like that was a really interesting analogy. And I always think that analogies stay with me more when I'm thinking of, maybe when I've got a bit of a challenge or there's something that I'm finding difficult. If I've heard an analogy or something that has resonated, like a story, it definitely helps to remind me rather than just a quote or, something like that. So yeah, the next time you're struggling or you're feeling like giving up, just remember that plane analogy. Remember how much momentum it takes to get off the ground. And if you're off the ground, do what it takes to stay there, create that consistency, create that momentum, because you don't want to be starting again. You really don't. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you all have a absolutely fantastic week. I was going to say enjoy the sunshine, but I'm not sure when this goes out if it's still going to be around. So fingers crossed, if you're in the UK, the sun is still shining, and I will see you all again next week. Thanks for listening. You can find us on Instagram at HelloSundayPod, or you can email us on hellosundaypod@outlook.com. Have a great week.